Good evening. Tonight we acknowledge that the program was recorded in advance, and as we sit here in the studio, Israel, Hamas, the United States, and Qatar are on the brink of finalizing a hostage deal. By the time you see this, we may learn that some of our citizens are finally coming home. But we've been here before. In the final hour, deals have vanished. Just before this recording, Hamas reportedly agreed in principle to the terms, a move we can only assume is influenced, at least in part, by the election of President-elect Donald Trump and his ultimatum that a deal must be signed before January 20th. Could Donald Trump's return to the White House reshape the Middle East? From potential strikes on Iran to Saudi deals and his unpredictable ties with Netanyahu. Just 1 week before the inauguration, the stakes are high. I'm Maayan Hoffman, executive editor of ILTV. Welcome to this week's Insider. Today we're going to take a deep dive into Trump's return to the White House and the impact on the Middle East with an expert panel. Please welcome Olga Deutch, Vice President of NGO Monitor, Yigal Marcus, board member of Republicans Overseas Israel, Avi Abelow, CEO of 12 Tribes Films, and Yissachar, Vice President of Research at Habithonistim. Let's get started. Wow, so Trump is taking office exactly 1 week from yesterday. I want to discuss the hostage deal, though, first, and how this all ties together. I'm curious. Let's start with you, Olga. Do you believe that Trump's ultimatum, his all hell to pay, actually influenced this deal, assuming that it's going to go through?
Well, I think your question sort of answers itself, meaning there's no guarantees with Trump and there's no free meals. We have seen in the first term that he has been extremely pro-Israel oriented and he has delivered, right? But that has come also at certain times with a certain price tag to it. I think that Trump's getting elected already showed a lot of results by just threatening or sending very clear messages, right? A lot of the things sort of fell into place, and we will see whether these are going to be delivered. I think that the hostages deal is obviously one of the most painful topics that can be raised, and there's no one right answer or one wrong answer. It's almost like whichever choice you make, you'll be making a fatal mistake. We all want, and I don't think anyone can assume that there will be ever a resolution of this war unless every citizen of the State of Israel returns home alive or not. At the same time, it begs a question, at what price? And what is the meaning of all the victims and the soldiers that fell in combat until now?
Especially given that we're going to be probably releasing thousands of Palestinian terrorists. Or, I mean, I'm going to turn to you because the question really is this deal good for Israel? You know, we feel the pain, as you heard. I mean, I get chills thinking of these people alive or dead coming back into our country. We've been waiting for so long. But what happens after?
Exactly, and this is the question, what's the follow-up? And I think we're walking a very thin line here. Eventually, we all want to see the hostages coming back home. The only question is, you know, the goal of the deal really here is when the benefit trumps the cost, and for sealing a deal for minimum cost for Israel, for minimum concessions on the part of Israel, with maximum concessions on the part of Hamas. And that could only be done with the benefit of military pressure. However, we saw that not all leverages were taken advantage of over the past year. We saw how Iran basically was non-existent international pressure on Iran, who's the main sponsor of Hamas's protege, propped it up to launch the October 7 attacks. The heads of Hamas in Doha are calling the shots, basically sitting in five-star hotels, and the pressure is not on them, but Hamas in Gaza. And finally, the humanitarian aid, which Secretary Blinken just bragged last week, that the United States managed to pound on the table and convince Israel to flow in humanitarian aid at all costs. That brings Israel to a very weak position to begin with in negotiations. Hamas knows that there is light in the tunnels and humanitarian aid could
But I think the question is, you know, we sign the deal, we get, let's say, 3, then 30, then whatever hostages home, God willing, right? But ultimately, we're also going to be making concessions, as you said. I mean, obviously, respond to this, because what happens? You know, we pull out of Gaza, we have a ceasefire, we say the soldiers are, I mean, we can always go back, but are we safe or are we unsafe when this deal is signed?
First of all, I think it's important to understand that there is such a larger picture to what's going on that we don't even know about. There are things on the table on a global geopolitical scale, whether with regards to Saudi Arabia, whether with regards to Russia, Ukraine. Unfortunately, we're being used as a little pawn, and our deal is being used as a pawn in a bigger game where we're going to be having to put up and pay a huge price. but we don't know the bigger impact of what it is. We'd all like to say, oh my God, this is about Trump then giving secret assurances that we'll be able to take out Iran. Maybe, maybe not. We don't know exactly. But ultimately, as an Israeli, as a Jew, first of all, obviously we want our hostages back. Second of all, there is no winning this war without Israel remaining in the Gaza Strip forever.
Forever.
Forever. Hamas, Palestinian Authority, pretty historic.
You're agreeing with this.
It's impossible for us to be able to protect ourselves. There is no way of beating the Sunni Shiite Islamic jihad by appeasing them. It's dangerous for the world to see that, oh my God, they can get away with massacring thousands of innocent people and not pay a price and still hold their land and still be able to kill us.
I mean, not pay a price. We've dismantled most of the infrastructure. We flattened most of Gaza. There's 40,000 people dead.
To kill us another day, the whole world is in trouble because they've seen appeasement works. So again, whatever happens now, deal or no deal, it's just a pinpoint in a much larger picture that we don't even know the full picture of.
And let me just say that the end game of this war must be that Hamas is eliminated and the threat from the Gaza Strip is removed, and that can only be achieved with a permanent military presence of Israel in the Gaza Strip until such time the Palestinians concede their armed struggle against Israel. All of this while bringing the hostages home. They're retained as bargaining chips in Hamas's very cruel and cynical game, and that must be a stage on the way to obtaining that end game.
Okay, so now I want to move to you, Yigal. Trump, has personally sent his own envoy already, Steve Witkoff, to be a part of these negotiations. He's been sitting alongside Brett McGurk from the Biden administration. In the end of the day, that's a lot of bipartisan work around the question of Israel. There has not been such a sentiment over the course of the last year. Do you feel that brings us maybe to an era? Do you think the Trump era will be different than the Biden era and that we'll feel more bipartisan support and there will be a working together across the aisle on behalf of the state of Israel?
Well, I actually think the reason why Steve Witkoff joined is because Brett McGurk can get the job done. At the end of the day, weakness invites problems and invites people like Hamas and their supporters to not do a deal. So Steve Witkoff came in, and lo and behold, thanks to President Trump's threats, deal was gotten. And so at the end of the day, I think that Steve Witkoff represents the future, which is a future based on strength, a future based on taking America seriously anywhere in the world. And I actually think I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle. I think Hamas made a terrible mistake. Trump didn't say, give me back 34 hostages. Trump said, I want all the hostages. And on January 21st, next week, on Tuesday, when Trump comes to the office and there are still 64 hostages that are being held, Hamas is going to have to answer for that.
And you think then they'll have all hell to pay?
I think they're making a huge mistake by not taking Donald Trump seriously.
Olga, do you agree?
Well, I most certainly hope so for the hostages, but I also think that I agree that the picture is much broader than that. And let's just...
So what will Trump's priorities be for the region?
Sorry?
So what will Trump's priorities then be for the region beyond the hostages?
It's a big question, and I think part of the package is not just military dominance and securing our borders. I think if we only look at the conflict as such, we're basically already falling into the old paradigm, pre-October the 7th. I think unless we look at the Palestinian society as a whole and we say there is a reason why October the 7th happened and why no one there stood for a second and said, oh my God, what is happening? We need a package that includes conditioning of humanitarian aid, that needs a long-term program of de-radicalizing that entire society, not only in Gaza, because the humanitarian aid, whether official aid by the international community or money that is being funneled through Qatar and other Arab states, is going in and endorsing hate of Israel, dehumanization of Israelis and Jews, and basically sending a message around the world that terror pays out. So I think we need a bigger plan.
So look, at the top of all of this terror we know is actually Iran. And I want to turn to you because do you think that the U.S. might actually lead a strike against Iran once Trump takes office? Or is he more likely to just provide us, let's call it the bunker busters, and tell us, okay, go out and do the dirty work?
Well, I think we're nearing a point of no return, really. And that's Trump's golden opportunity on day one to decide what direction does he want to lead the Middle East. And that's really the moment to regain American leadership in the region. I think that the choice that we attempted to avoid all these years can no longer be procrastinated. And I think the only way to remove the Iranian gun off the table is by leading a limited, preemptive, and military action against Iran's nuclear program.
By U.S. or by Israel?
So a combination of the United States and Israel. We know that the U.S. has B-2 stealth bombers, which Israel does not have. We just recently used them in Yemen, the United States, And that sends a very strong message to the Arab world as well. If Trump wants to do all these great things, peace between Israel and the Arab world, Iran is standing in the way of all these policy items. And I think once we remove just the nuclear program, no boots on the ground, I think we can see finally peace and prosperity in the Middle East.
Or can we actually remove the nuclear program? My understanding is that the nuclear program is in multiple locations, that some of it is very, very deep underground. I know some of these weapons are actually able to do that, but also that it's centered around centrifuges, which apparently can be created anywhere. So are we able to actually destroy Iran's nuclear program?
Yes, the United States and Israel have the military capacity of technically doing that, but I think we were hamstringed by something much larger up until now, which is, we know that once we strike Iran, we invite a whole host of, missiles coming from Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, and Iran itself, raining down on Israeli cities. And now look, Iran is much more vulnerable than it's ready to admit. All of its frontal defense is basically decimated. And we know, reportedly, Israel struck some of its air defense as recently as October. And so we don't get any more favorable conditions than that to remove the Iranian gun off the table. And Arab countries themselves want this to happen as well. They've been kind of wary of warming up relations with Israel and the United States, boosting their oil supply and warming up relations with Israel because of the Iranian threat. And so if we remove that, I think we can usher in also sending a strong message to China, Russia, even the rogue regime in Venezuela, where Iran is leading drug trafficking and mass migration.
Well, that's very interesting that you bring that up, because Russia and Ukraine, and Yigal, I want to turn to you for a minute. Trump actually said he was also going to end the Russia-Ukraine war. And last I checked, the war is still raging, okay? So that didn't happen. What does that mean, with the other promises he's made? Do we have trust in Trump to be able to carry these things out if that's a pretty big promise, and it's certainly not coming much to fruition? What does that mean for the region?
Well, I think, it's going to take more time than he thought, although I think both sides wanted to get a deal, but I think they're now jostling for a position to try to get the deal that's going to be maximally beneficial to either side. I think that Trump, when he comes in, is going to put an enormous amount of pressure on certainly Russia, but also do what he can to get, finally, Ukraine to concede to a deal that everyone can live with, and really create a new reality in Europe. He's going to have to offer security guarantees, because to not offer security guarantees guarantees an invasion as soon as Putin can regrow his military and rebuild his military. So I think that it's going to happen, and I think that both Putin and Zelensky know that. But everyone's jostling for position, and I suspect next week we're going to see a serious move towards an agreement like we're seeing with Hamas.
It's interesting. And Trump's 100 executive orders that we're expecting, I think, on the first day in office. Now, I want to move to Saudi Arabia, because speaking of regional peace, Olga, let me ask you about that. Is a normalization deal ready? Do you think that Saudi Arabia is actually planning to sign almost immediately when Trump takes office, as he's insinuated?
Well, I do think that whatever deal is in making is already a leftover from the previous Trump administration, and the Biden administration tried to pick up and piggyback right on it and bring it home. October the 7th sort of hijacked that. And I do think, like everything we're discussing today, it's going to depend on the broader, chessmate game that is being played geopolitically. We are having a big convention about Syria, right? Because obviously everyone is very invested in making sure that there is stability of some sort in Syria with the new leadership. And that begs the question, what's the role that Turkey will be playing? How does that play vis-a-vis Russia and Ukraine issue? Now we have new leadership in Brussels as well. Let's not overlook that. That is very militant, in sort of speaking, right? When it comes to very opinionated when it comes to Russia. Does not come from Western Europe. And I think all these things will be on the table. One thing is for sure, I think it's, while we are looking at tectonic movements, it will, at the end of the day, boil down to whether most of the players are interested in stability or into destabilizing the whole region further and further. And all eyes are on Trump, and in a way, it gives him tremendous power, but also incredible responsibility and pressure.
So, Avi, let me ask you, because speaking of players and peace, the Palestinian Authority, the areas of Judea and Samaria, this has certainly been an issue that has come up when we talk about Trump coming into office. The settler movement, of which you are a part, is really pushing to be able to annex Judea and Samaria, to exert sovereignty over it, as you call it. Do you believe that that's something that is going to happen under Donald Trump, and how long will the settler movement wait before they start really pushing?
I'd like to believe that it will happen under President Donald Trump. Don't know if it will or not. I definitely will be active in trying to ensure that it does happen. And connecting this to Saudi Arabia, one of the very important messages is that no matter how important normalization is between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and it is important also on a geopolitical scale in terms of allowing America to tackle China by finally having trade routes through the Mideast that includes us and Saudi Arabia, sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, Israel having firm control and never allowing for Arab self-rule like a Palestinian Authority or Hamas to be able to threaten all Israelis is much more important than normalization with Saudi Arabia. And that's not just me saying this. Israeli Energy Minister Eli Cohen said this as well. With all the importance of normalization with Saudi Arabia, sovereignty in Judea and Samaria is more important for Israel's existential existence than normalization with Saudi Arabia.
Or do you agree with this sentiment, and do you think that there's even an opportunity for some kind of peace with the Palestinians as Trump takes office? We had the deal the century before. It's not clear, by the way, that Trump doesn't envision either a two-state solution or some kind of autonomy for the Palestinians. What's your take?
Well, I think in American foreign policy studies, let's say, they say peace is the goal and peace through strength. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to achieve peace, you got to obtain strength as well. I think Iran is the key here. Once you remove the Iranian program off the table, you bring home Arab countries, you checkmate Iran, as I said, and so you create a much broader regional alliance. So it's now time for all hands on deck. And I think Arab countries, if the delta between the parties used to be, how you treat the Palestinians, right now Arab countries are much more interested in how they secure their own regimes. And Israel has much more leeway to, exert sovereignty over strategic depth in Judea and Samaria. I agree, the Jordan Valley, Area C, all these places are strategic to Israel's very existence. We cannot exist in what Eva Evan called the Auschwitz borders. So absolutely, this is Israel's eastern border. We defend ourselves against all threats coming from, any truck could drive from Tehran to Tel Aviv. I think in that reality, Israel can really take advantage of its renewed strength and demand much more negotiations.
And I guess my last question, I want each of you to take a minute to be able to answer it, is actually centered around Trump's relationship with Netanyahu and his unpredictability. We've talked here about so many issues of which we have this vision for what it will look like when Trump comes into office here in Israel, where 70% of the population supported Trump, by polls, not that they can vote, but they were really felt that Trump would be best for Israel. Do you think his relationship with Netanyahu will be a good relationship? And are we at all concerned about his unpredictability? If everybody can take, 30 seconds to a minute to answer, or you start?
I get the benefit of the start. Yeah, I think unpredictability is an advantage at some point. I think Trump comes from a very clear moral compass as well, not just his political views, but also his belief that you should prevent nuclear proliferation when he talks about even in Russia and China, not just Iran and North Korea. When he talks about Israel, he really goes back home to who's good and who's bad, who's fighting against the forces of evil, really going back to the Reagan doctrine. I think we're going to have very fruitful 4 years, if so we choose. Just need to take advantage of what's best for America and how we can really work together to make good on our interests.
What about you, Avi? 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Listen, we're having an unbelievable opportunity for 4 years under President Trump. And it's not just about President Trump and his relationship with Netanyahu. It's also the unbelievable team that he's putting together around him. But I do believe that what's more important than the actual team is we can no longer ignore the religious aspect of the conflict we're in. Mm-hmm. And so long as everything is being just dealt with as a deal, that everyone has to be a win-win, and it does not take into consideration the religious aspect of the war here in the Middle East, which is not just against us, but it's against the whole freedom-loving world, that even if Iran is taken down, there's still Turkey that's a problem, and Egypt that's a problem, the Muslim Brotherhood that's a problem. So long as that continues to be ignored, it doesn't make a difference who's president of the United States or who's prime minister of Israel. We're going to continue to have our problems. So I hope we have people waking up to the truth.
And
of
certainly
situation.
The evangelical community being supportive of Trump sees the religious aspect of the conflict. I really want to keep the answer short, so Yigal, you go ahead and take it.
So I think that what Trump respects are people of strength. and people who don't cower and collapse in front of others. We have in Bibi Netanyahu, I think, in my opinion, a Churchillian character who has really led Israel through a very, very difficult time, probably the most difficult time in its history. And I think that whether Trump loves him personally or not, you do have somebody that he respects. And when Israel inevitably goes to elections, they have to think about what kind of leader we want who's going to be able to talk to Trump and demand President Trump's respect. So I do think that there's going to be inevitable differences of opinion, but I do think that there's a deep respect there, and certainly Trump and his entire administration, to Avi's point, is a Israel-loving administration, and I think we have an incredible opportunity over the next 4 years to really accomplish some great things here.
Olga.
We're talking about two tough leaders, outspoken and with a firm hand once they have their policy in front of their eyes. We have to not forget that no matter what sentiments Trump and his administration might hold vis-a-vis Israel or the broader Middle East, the only thing that really they care about and they need to be accountable for is American interests. So as long as Netanyahu can craft a discourse that plays into that and they see a win-win situation, we will see a favorable development. And ultimately, as I said in the beginning, there are no free meals, meaning the question is not only what we might get, the question is what are the concessions that we might be
and we will
forced to pay.
have to see that playing out, definitely. You know, I guess we only have to wait a week and then we will know how all of this will continue. So that's all the time, unfortunately, that we do have this evening. Thank you very much to all of our guests. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching Insider. Have a safe and pleasant evening.